والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والذين جاهدوا فينا لنهدينهم سبلنا سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. So as we traverse and discuss a little bit of the kayfiyat, the halat, the states and conditions that a seeker goes through, different maqamat that a person might come across, there is one kayfiyat that usually stays with a person from the start to the end, and that kayfiyat is called raja or hope. If you remember, we did discuss a little bit about khawf, fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this could be considered as the polar opposite of that kayfiyah. And some mashayikh have written that when a person is young and when a person is healthy, they should have khawf ghalib on themselves because it helps them stay away from a life of sin and disobedience. But as a person gets older, as a person gets maybe sicker or they get suffer from any ailment, then this kayfiyah of raja or hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should prevail. This kayfiyat is ajib because it is something that brings us joy, brings us pleasure, and it gives us husn dhan towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, it is ajib that some mashayikh have considered this kayfiyat to be an interference of sort. And the reason might be because at certain maqamat, the tafweez with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what we call raza bil qaza is so solid for a person that they consider hoping for certain things to be hoping, to be a little bit of complaining. Think of it as like a shikwa, that they're complaining with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, for us, this is a good kayfiyat to have, because if a person does not have hope, it is extremely easy to fall into despair, especially nowadays. It is very easy to become hopeless and fall in despair, and as we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran that قُلْ يَا عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ لَا تَقْنَطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ, that do not despair from the rahmat, from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So a nuance there could be, where does the hope lie? Is the hope in us, in ourselves, or is the hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Or is the hope with effort, or is the hope without effort? Right? So those can result in very different outcomes. So for example, if the hope is, yes, I can do this and I can do that, then maybe this person is readying himself or herself for tests and imtihan from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because this rahmah, this hope should really be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and His nusra, His help and His tawfiq is what makes things happen. Now, it does not mean, and some people get confused by this, it does not mean that you don't put in the effort. Yes, that's just like Allah Ta'ala is raziq, and wallahu khairu raziqeen. There's no doubt about that. But fis sama'i rizqukum, that your rizq is comes from the skies. There's absolutely no doubt. Now, does it mean that you don't make any effort? Of course not. You make the effort, but the tawfiq to making the effort and the athar, the ta'thir in the effort is from Allah Ta'ala. Some people make a lot of effort and maybe they don't get anything, or they get something, it comes with imtihan, without afiyah. Some people make very little effort and subhanallah, the athar is there, the ta'thir is there. Right? And it comes without any kind of test associated with it. Right? So our fear is that we put our trust and we put our hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it has to be realistic too. It has to be realistic. For example, if a person is engaged in Gurah Kabira and this person does not control their gaze, does not control their tongue, does not control what goes in their ears, cannot control their thoughts, this person has become a musibah for himself and for others. And then the hope is, that I become a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On some level, it's kind of doing like a joke with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Because, then the question becomes, how serious are you in that intentionality and that hope that you have with Allah? Right? So, it's not a zero-sum game. Because some people will say this, and ulama have written against this. That they will live a life of their own, nafs parasti. They will do whatever they want. And then, when you give them da'wat ilallah, then they'll be like, oh, Allah maaf karne, and Allah will forgive. So this is like misplaced hope, right? Because you do the effort, you ask for, you do tawbah, you ask for istighfar, and then the hope is that, oh Allah, inshallah, Allah maaf karne wala, that I've put in everything that I possibly could, and then I leave that acceptance of tawbah, just like Adam alayhi salam, رَبَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا وَإِن لَمْ تَغْفِرْ لَنَا وَتَرْحَمْنَا لَنَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. We have been taught over and over, and even today we heard that dua, Rabbi inni zalamtu nafsi faghfir li. It's that acceptance. Yes, I made this mistake and I'm going to correct myself. Right? So that's the hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept that tawbah and help us change, and the tawfiq is there. Okay? So we have to be a little careful that, this hope does not put in a lax state. And this is why some mashayikh have considered it to be like an interference with the ta'alluq with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it can sometimes put a person in put their guards down. Everything is fine, nothing to worry about. Why do we have to worry? So, some of those kayfiyat have to be kept in check. But, it's for a mubtadi, it's a good thing. It's a good thing to have hope, because it helps them perhaps put in the effort, have energy about it, like, oh yes, I have to do this, yes, I can do this, yes, I can attitude. Right? So it's good to have that. But, for people who are spiritually mature and who have put in the riyaza, this hope changes, because now they're already doing all of that. Yes, I can, and they have done it. And now the hope is really about, making sure that purity of intentions come in, right? That tasfiyah niyat comes in, that khalaw, that emptiness of heart comes in, meaning you empty your hearts from all other intentions but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, they, it's necessarily, the result is that they will reject the dunya, they will learn how to exercise self-restraint, they will conform to the Sharia more easily, right? So the hope is the same thing, but depends on where you are in your journey. Some of what the person might be focusing on changes. But what about like Ahlullah, right? They have hope as well. Their hope is that, their hope is to really get the mushahada of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their hope is rida of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that really just kind of disconnects them from the dunya. They disconnect, they don't have any hope with the insaniyat, not the makhluk anymore. Right? Because all of that just returns back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there, here, like in the second state, maybe if you're rejecting the dunya, here you have rejected the dunya. Right? So there you're kind of putting the effort, yes, I have to do this to reject it. But, Ahlullah will have rejected the dunya. And, we understand it that from their heart, that it does not have any place in their heart anymore. So, this is a useful kayfiyat to have. But it should not be used in a way that weakens our himmah, that weakens our resolve, and that, on some level puts like buhtan on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in a sense of everything is going to work out for me no matter what. Right? That's now because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is adil as well. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if we are focusing on the rahmah, which we really should in general, but the other aspect of jalal of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just as much present there as well. So we have to be, we have to use it very carefully. Okay. So we make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we hope to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah ta'ala allows this time of Ramadan to be a source of our redemption, or a source of our change and transformation, a true tawbah, a true inabat towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we hope that Allah ta'ala gives us the tawfiq for amal that will please Him, for suhbah that will rectify us and really change our direction completely from inside, So Allah ta'ala becomes our only true maqsad in our lives. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Inshallah for a few minutes just.